Can everyone see me? Yes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the very first Spark It Flash session. Whether you've been counting down to tonight or stumbled in, not quite sure what to expect, but we're really glad you're here. This is a space for honest conversation about building things, and we think you're going to leave tonight with a lot to think about. I shall now let our other host, Radin sir, speak a few words.
Our guest today is Mr. Dhanika Perera, founder of Basha Lanka and the person behind Helakuru, Pay Here, Helapay and Helago. If you've ever typed in Sinhala on your phone, there's a good chance you've used something here.
What makes tonight different is that we are not here for the highlight reel. We asked Mr. Dhanika to talk to us about the honest side of startups, the early mornings where nothing works, the moments of doubt, and what it actually takes to go from an idea to something real. We're really grateful you said yes to being here tonight. Welcome.
Thank you, Dimitri. Nice to be here.
Sir, you often say you became an entrepreneur by accident. Looking back, how much of that is actually true and how much was actually planned?
Thank you for that question, and good evening to all of you. It's really great to be here, sharing my journey and how I started to build things with all of you. I always say that I was an accidental entrepreneur because I never had an ambition in my childhood to start my own business or actually be any of these, right? My ambition was from the childhood was to be a software engineer. So that's what I learned for. That's why I chose advanced level mathematics stream to get into the engineering faculty. So that's actually how it began. So all turned around due to a university project that I had to do, and I choose to do it in my own passion, rather than going beyond the trends, or rather than going beyond what everyone else is doing. I thought of actually been doing something related to my own passion. So I was so passionate about this Sinhala font, Sinhala, language and all that. So that, I did something relevant to that. So that's how actually that became an innovation at the end of the day. And that innovation attracted the industry demand at that time. It was from a telco, Etisalat. And Etisalat approached me and they were interested in what I did. And that actually how I accidentally, got an opportunity to form a company and, be the CEO or be the founder of my own company. So it was actually not just for word, but actually it was an accidental thing that happened.
I
Sir,
see.
Sir, what did you think you'd end up doing when you were in school?
Uh, so as I mentioned, no, my childhood ambition was actually to become a software engineer. So in addition to the passion that I had for Sinhala, I was so, passionate, so enthusiastic about, technology, computers. At that time, the mobile phones was not much there. Smartphones, all that feature phones were there. So that my interest was actually to work on computers, work on software, and become a software engineer. So if this accidental thing did not happen, I would mostly ended up be a software engineer working somewhere.
So, sir, if Basha never existed, what do you think your life would look like today?
I think I have to recite the same answer. Maybe I'll work somewhere as a software engineer, or maybe a UI UX engineer, because I mean, after getting to the university and after going through the software journey, right now my technical expertise is mostly into UI UX design. So still I design I lead designing most of our products and services UI UX side. So even if Basha is not existing today, I maybe ended up being a UI UX engineer, UI UX designer at some IT company.
So Helakuru started as a solution to a problem most people weren't even talking about. There was no way to type in Sinhala on a smartphone. So what made you believe it was worth pursuing?
I think, it was not, as I mentioned, it was not actually, I mean, I did not make Helakuru to build a business out of it, or, start a company out of it. It was just due to my passion, right? That passion, and also a problem that I personally faced, right? So as a person who was interested on Sinhala language, Sinhala fonts and all that, it was a problem for me, myself, okay, with I mean, not having a proper way to read and write Sinhala on mobile devices, right? And that problem actually became highlighted due to that situational thing also at that time. So in that era, this blogging culture, Sinhala blogging culture was trending among most of the university students. Everyone actually had their own blog, writing nice things, in Sinhala. So I also wrote a Sinhala blog. I also maintained a Sinhala blog called Dhanika Situvili. And it was a nice culture. I mean, everyone is actually reading everyone else's blogs and comment on them likewise. Like, ඔගොල්ලන්ගේ කාලේ නම් Facebook නේ Facebook හැලිනේ, but you are actually expressing yourselves, right? So likewise, at that time, it was Sinhala blogs, right? So as a blogger, as a single blogger that who used to write the stuff in Sinhala, this problem actually became highlighted to me. Okay, even though I spent my time to write blog articles, and everyone else was also doing the same, but reading that blogs, the audience of that blogs is actually currently limited only to the computer users. Or someone should have a laptop or a desktop to read that blogs, right? So that's actually where I got inspired or motivated. If we can give the Sinhala reading capability, Sinhala font reading capability to mobile devices, we can actually make all these blog posts readable for anyone, anywhere, anytime through mobile devices, right? So that was actually what inspired me, where I got the idea to make this happen. And initially, it was to solve my own problem, and that problem of a small community, the Sinhala bloggers. But unexpectedly, it went so viral, right? Not only to read blogs, not only to not only between that close group, it actually spread through word of mouth. So much of people started using that. So much of people started referring that to their friends and family, so that it actually grew to a large user base exceeding over millions. So that's how it happened.
So, sir, you say Helakuru started as a university project, right? So, where along the line do you think it felt like a real company, like a business?
I think I started feeling it like that with the growth of our user base, right? So when there's only 10, 15 users for a product, you don't actually take it serious. Even if it is 100 to 500, it does not make sense a lot, right, for a product. But when the product actually grow up to a level where thousands of people use it actively, and thousands of people providing feedback, giving feedback, and again, it doesn't stop from thousands, but it actually passes 1 million downloads on the Play Store and App Store, right? And it is recognized also, because Play Store and App Store highlights the number of downloads for mobile applications, mobile apps, so that we were the first Sri Lankan app to pass 1 million download, that milestone, that number, right? So that actually that is actually where I started very seriously thinking about it, because being the first step to pass 1 million downloads among Sri Lankan users, it is something serious, right? So then actually we started planning its roadmap, and especially that is how we evolved from a single purpose app, single input app, into a multi-purpose super app, right? If this download or user base actually did not grow, we would actually not thinking of evolving Helakuru beyond that. But with that user base, growing user base, over 1 million user base, we thought actually, no, this is not just a tool, this is not just a keyboard. We can do a lot more than this from this product, right? And that is where we started exploring, expanding the services offered through Helakuru into other areas as well, starting from news, Esana Apigenawa, then actually Helapay for payments, and Helaru for entertainment, Helakuru for mobility. Likewise, we started expanded bit by bit by realizing that with that user base, with that a larger audience, we can do more for our people, rather than just staying as their keyboard input. So that's how we grew step by step.
So Helakuru had millions of users for years, but couldn't make money, ads didn't work, paid features didn't sell. This went on for roughly 5 years. So, sir, was there ever a point where shutting it down would have been the sensible decision?
Yeah, as you correctly mentioned, I mean, even though Helakuru was successful as a product, or successful from the user's point of view, right? It actually solved a problem for them. It actually, gave a new capability for them to write single on mobile screen, right? Even though it actually make a social impact in that aspect, it was very challenging for us to find out a business model for that. So that was actually the one of the major challenge that we faced when building Helakuru. Everything went okay from the user's perspective. But I mean, for us to sustain it, right? If a product to be sustained, it has to be financially sustainable as well, right? Otherwise, what happened? We are interested we actually focus on it and do stuff. But if there is no way to financially sustain it, normally it actually get out of the focus and the product get declines. So for us to keep it in our focus, we wanted to find out a way to financially sustain it as well. So we tried out many kind of business models, right? And some of the business model failed, and we tried and tried and tried, and finally we could actually find out a business model about 3-4 years after introducing Helakuru only. We could actually find out the business model for Helakuru. So that was actually the journey we had to spend, without monetizing it. And finally, after we found out the monetization mechanism, we could actually explore more and more stuff. For your question, I mean, whether I was actually felt of giving up it, if my only intention was actually making money, I mean, the monetizing it, I would have, thought of giving it up, because 4 years is actually a far too way for a product to, start monetizing. Many of the products actually give up the product journey if they cannot actually find out a way to monetize it within 1 or 2 years, right? But in my case, it was totally different, because I started it not actually to make money, not actually to, as a business, but actually for my personal passion, to address my own personal problem, and also that problem for that community, blogging community, right? So that actually motivated me, even though we couldn't, monetize it, even though couldn't make revenue out of it. That personal passion motivated me to keep it focused, keep it going until the level that we could, break through and find out the business model. So that's if that passion was not in me, maybe that may be the case. But since it was a passion project, a product built out of passion, it actually survived.
So you said Basha has always operated in blue ocean spaces nobody else was competing in. But with Helakuru, you walk straight into a market with Pick Me and Uber already in it. What made you do that? What created such a big leap?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when product gets evolved, we tend to build solutions out of its own strengths, right? Now, if actually Helakuru didn't have such an audience, about 4.4 million, and if actually Helakuru as a brand has not actually, gained a lot of love and, affection from the people in the country, we would have never gone to a red ocean like ride hailing, right? And that is one aspect. Uh, we didn't have to actually start from zero. We had already built, strengths around us, the massive user base, the brand loyalty, and our years of expertise on digital and all that. So it was always in our roadmap to facilitate any kind of digital service that can be facilitated through a mobile app through Helakuru, right? And that was actually the whole idea of super app. So that's why actually right now we are providing many kind of services through Helakuru as a super app, right? And the other part, uh, now, even though actually ride hailing existed in Sri Lanka over 10 years, it is actually not a problem that is completely solved yet, right? There are still problems existing in that ride hailing market, right? From the passengers point of view, we don't much see that problems, because for passengers it's actually make a way to make their lives easier. But it's not actually a single sided market, but a two sided market, right? For a two sided market to sustain, only one party becomes satisfied is not enough. You have to actually take care of the both sides of the market, otherwise it will collapse at some point, right? So that's where we identified the other side of the market, which is actually the drivers have a lot of issues, uh, because actually it is their earning, it is their way of earning for their life, and actually they are facing many of the challenges, many of the problems due to the unresolved problems existing in the available competitors in the market, right? So that's where actually we thought, okay, what if we can solve these problems for them, right? And that's why we brought Helago in a different kind of a new concept, where instead of algorithmic matching, we actually brought out a new concept to the market, uh, not to decide everything on a centralized way, but actually to empower people, uh, I mean, behind this service, right? Empower the two people, the passenger and the driver, to take a agreed decision on whatever the service that they are actually utilizing, right? So what the way we offered empowered them to take agreed decisions, so that both the driver is happy because it actually the price and everything is actually suggested by him, and the passenger is also happy because they actually choose between multiple options. They actually choose who they go with, right? So that's actually an informed decision. That's actually an agreed decision between the two parties. So both can actually go on a happier ride. There's no grievances from any party, right? So that's what we did, coming from a new concept to address that existing problems in that market, and it worked, right? There were some situations, some practical situations where that new model didn't work, so that we had to adapt to a hybrid model. Right now, actually, Helakuru goes as a hybrid model where in peak times, where people are more of actually in an urgency, we actually do it in the same old way. But if there's no urgency and not urgent geographically areas, we are actually doing it in the new way that we introduced, right? So that hybrid model has successfully worked, and people adapted to it, and it's working, right? So the reason, one, to answer your question, one, actually we leveraged our existing strengths that we build around our existing product, the user base, the brand loyalty, and the tech expertise. And then the other side of the from other side, we actually identified the still existing problems in that market and came up with a new idea, a new concept to solve that in a new way.
Sir, when you're building something, how do you tell the difference between this needs more time and nobody actually wants this?
Can you repeat the question, please?
When you're building something, how do
Yeah.
you tell the difference between this needs more time and nobody actually wants it?
Okay, so now always when building a new thing, the time actually is a crucial factor, right? Sometimes actually, if we get so much delay to put our product or put our idea into the market, it'll lose the opportunity that was available before, right? So that it's very critical to decide what is the right time to prepare it for some extent to the market, uh, to not to actually reiterate or not to actually over engineer the product, or less engineer the product. So this is actually what we called as MVP, minimum viable product, right? So in software, what the magic is, now in software is actually the products are always evolving, right? Now, if it is actually a hardware product, suppose a vehicle, right? A vehicle model, BYD, or somewhat vehicle model. So if such kind of a product is designed and it is actually manufactured, that model, at the time you put that model to the market, that model is that model, right? You can't actually take iterations of updates to that model, right? So that you have to do everything to prepare it for the market, because after you put it to the market, you can actually do nothing, right? But in terms of software, it's actually totally different. In software, we actually have this opportunity to introduce one product into the market, one version of the product into the market. And when the people are getting used to it, when the user base is growing, we can actually evolve that product very rapidly, right? So right now, for an example from our latest product, Helakuru, initially we introduced it as completely that negotiation-based model. But when we actually encounter that practical situations and decided that there should be the same old way also for practical situations, we actually evolved it as a hybrid model, right? So recently we released Helakuru 2.0, so that all the existing Helakuru users can update the app to Helakuru 2.0 and get a a whole new experience, a better experience, right? And even Helakuru, the same story. 15 years back, it was just a keyboard app. But right now, if someone actually, if the same user is actually using that, it's not actually that same old keyboard, but a super app with multiple options, right? So that in software, it's very critical to decide, uh, uh, very critical to face it, right? අදියරෙන් අපි කොහොමද මේක ගෙනියන්නේ, right? For the phase one, for the initial release, you have to actually decide what are the bare minimal, හරි? මිනිස්සු මේක use කරන්න නැතුව ඉන්න නම් මම මොනවද දෙන්න ඕන ටික, what are the most essential things, what are the most critical things that I should give, and then what I should leave for my next versions, right? The value additions or improvements, the nice to have ones, that kind of things where I can leave it for the next versions. And the initial version, I have to be careful to make it not more engineered or over engineered or under engineered, but to engineer it to the exact level where it actually suits the product market fit, right? දැන් එහෙම කියලා if you did not actually meet the least expected, you have to decide what is actually the bare minimal, what is actually the least expectation of the user, and what I have to fulfill in the first phase.
So everyone talks about failed startup ideas. In your experience, do ideas fail because they are bad ideas or because of what happens after this idea?
Yeah, sometimes, in every entrepreneur's journey, there are so much of failed ideas, failed products than the successful ideas. So even my story, today about Helakuru, Helago, Helapay, these success ones. But there are so many things actually we tried out, we put our effort, but actually we couldn't make it out, right? We have to give it up and move forward, right? So that is actually the nature of building products. That is actually the nature of entrepreneurship, right? And now, why products fail? If I ask you a question, why products fail, it can be different reasons, right? Sometimes actually, the idea itself is not a valid idea, right? Sometimes we come up with solutions for unexisting problems, right? ඇත්තටම නැති මේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් විසඳන්න සමහරලාට අපි try කරනවා. So that actually ended up with no one is actually having a need to use your product, right? That is one reason. And another reason is actually very high competition. You're actually trying to do something in a new way, but very slightly different to the existing players in the market. So in that way also it can be failed, because if the users does not seeing a worthiness, right? If they don't actually see it as worth to switch from their existing tool or existing brand to your brand because of the the tiny or slight value addition that you provide, again your product, your idea can be bad, right? Your product can be failed. And also bad execution can also happen. Sometimes the idea is very good, right? Idea is very good. Idea has a unique value to solve a problem, right? If executed well, it may grab the market, but the execution is low, right? The execution is not good, right? Sometimes the team, right? If some entrepreneurs, some startup founders think that they can do everything by themselves, right? That is not, should not be the way, right? If I am actually good at technology, I may not be good at marketing. I may not good at business development. So that is where you have to team up, right? Teamed up is all about expanding your strengths, right? If I have few strengths, if you have strengths that I don't have, right? If I and you join together, we have all these strengths as a team, right? So that is where we should actually teamed up with having people with different backgrounds, having people with different strengths, so that all together, all that strengths become our strengths as a team, right? So that bad execution can be a reason when the team is not formed well, team is not formed correctly, right? Sometimes we teamed up with people who has the same strengths. Engineering නම් engineering ම තියෙන කීප දෙනෙක් එකතු වෙලා වැඩක් නැහැ, right? Because if you have the engineering skills, you should have actually other, because a company needs or a product needs multiple kind of skills, multiple kind of knowledge to become successful, right? So that bad execution can also be a reason. And then there's no way to find out capital, right? For software, that's not actually a big deal, because for to make a software, to make a minimum viable product and get it into the market, you need literally zero capital, right? If you have a laptop, I always share this when sharing my story, as the capital for my business, I only had the laptop brought to me by my parents when I got into the university, and my university internet connection. Right? So those two are the only capital that I had when I started, this business, or started my first product, right? So software, that may not be a software products, that may not be a case, but many of the other products, if it is actually a hardware product, if it is actually an electronics product, or a chemical, or a mechanical kind of product, sometimes you need a capital for raw materials, for machineries, for manufacturing stuff, to build up a supply base, all that stuff, right? For marketing, if you need heavier marketing, right? So less capital also can be a reason for that. Most of the time, my most common reason is actually, people have ideas, but they do not execute, right? That's the most reason. ගොඩක් අයට ideas තියෙනවා. හැබැයි ඒවනේ ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නේ සෑහෙන පොඩි දෙනයි, right? තමන්ට idea එකක් තියෙනවා නම්, my only advice, start from somewhere, right? If you have an idea to build something, start from somewhere, right? Other things will actually follow, but if you do not start, nothing will happen.
So, sir, what's a piece of startup advice that you've heard or received that sounds great in theory, but it's actually terrible?
Okay. Sometimes actually, we hear things about never giving up, right? So if it is sometimes it says that you should have perseverance up to a level that you never give up anything for any reason, right? But it works in some scenarios. For an example, now when I start Pay here as a payment gateway facility targeting B2B, initially it was actually very challenging. We got several regulatory challenges and all that. So I felt that never giving up mindset should be there. And in that case, it worked, right? I didn't give up. I went to the regulators. I got the legal approval. I got the central bank approval, and restarted the operations. And Pay here is going well even right now, right? But sometimes for some products, never giving up means if you are actually, taking too much of effort to make it sustainable, may make it, successful, right? But still you do not actually see, promising result. It ended up being a waste at the end of the day, the time and the effort you put it up on that, right? For an example, back in the days, it was a failure product. We introduced an app called Yalu, right? Yalu was actually a kind of a chat app at that time. So we, in terms of technologically, our team spent so much of months and effort to build it as a product, but ultimately it didn't actually attract the market. This is actually about 6-7 years back, right? Didn't actually attract the market. Even the user base was not actually grew up, and even there was no much of a visible business model that we could monetize it. So we continued actually putting our effort for another few months. But at the end of the day, we realized that, okay, there's not worth to put more and more effort. If the product cannot be successful, it's better to actually, leave it there and move forward, right? Discontinue and move forward. So sometimes that theoretically never giving up will not always work, right? I don't say it does not work, because for pay here, it worked, right? Through so much of challenges, we could actually get it going. But for some other products, it didn't work. So always that theoretical things is not always correct for every situation. So you have to decide what is actually the best decision that you should take in your case. And, gut feeling helps us a lot as entrepreneurs to decide it better, right? And you should move forward with your own decisions, not actually the theoretical decisions.
Sir, you met founders at every stage of the journey. What's something people consistently get wrong about entrepreneurship?
Yeah, sometimes people think entrepreneurship is all about, making money, and also sometimes people think entrepreneurship is all about, running a business, right? But there's a huge difference between a traditional business or a businessman and an entrepreneur, right? So this is something that many people get it wrong. Even our media, තාමත් අර කඩයක් කරන කෙනෙක් ඔපවා අපේ මීඩියා වලින් විවසායකෙක් කියලා අඳුන්වනවා. But entrepreneur has a very deep meaning than a businessman, right? Businessmen actually, if I don't know you are from which background, if you are from commerce kind of background, you will understand what I say. Now, for a business, right? For a business, what matters is actually, you don't need much of innovation or, new ideas, creativity to run a business. You can just follow, right? You can follow the existing products and services. You can follow the existing pricing. You can follow the existing business models, right? Existing supply chains and all that. And you can be a competitor, or you can be another player in a specific market. Suppose a yogurt factory, right? මට yogurt factory I don't have to innovate anything, right? I can actually follow what is the ingredients used for creating your manufacturing yogurt. I can actually I know what are the machineries I need, what are the labor force that I need, right? What is the packaging, what is the market price, everything I can follow the market, right? And I can be another competitor to this yogurt market, right? The mama yogurt it's actually the number of people eating yogurt. Do they increase? No, right? It's actually the same number of people. But I can be actually a player for that market and, grab a portion of that market. That is business, right? But entrepreneurship means you are actually solving a problem, right? You're actually not doing something that is already done by someone else, but you're actually trying to do some new thing by fulfilling an unresolved need, right? Or solving an unresolved problem, right? නාම හරි ප්‍රශ්නයකට ගැටලුවකට විසඳුමක් සපයන එකක් තමයි අතනම entrepreneurship එක කියන්නේ. So that what it means, if you actually do it successfully, if you actually solve that problem successfully, you create a new market there, right? You don't become a player for an existing market as in businessman. You're actually creating a new market, right? And then actually, දැන් අපි Helakuru introduce කරනකොට there was none of the products existed like that. So that we created a new market there, right? So right now there is actually a market for keyboard apps, right? There are so many international players also, Gboard, Zifkey and all that, and Lankavet, Flash keyboard, Dream keyboard, keypad, right? And also we could be the price maker for that, right? Keyboard facility, the first time actually, business model was introduced. Helakuru Pro we introduced, and we set the market price, right? And that is actually the what entrepreneurship is, right? Solving a problem. And that's where you need this creativity. That's where you need this innovative thinking, and that's where you need to creatively, think about monetizing it, right? Not the old ways of the work sometimes, right? So There's a huge difference between that, running a business or actually being an entrepreneur and building an entrepreneurship, right? So this is something that many of the people, many of the media, everyone actually gets wrong about entrepreneurship.
So if a student was to walk up to you after this session and pitch to you their startup idea, what
Yeah.
would be the first thing you would like to know about it?
Yes. First, I would actually ask them what is actually the problem that they are going to solve with this, right? Because as I mentioned, that is all what entrepreneurship is all about, right? If it is something that someone else has already solved or someone else has already addressed, then actually I would ask, what is the difference between the existing solutions, right? Existing, things available in the market to do the same thing, and this your new thing, right? If there is a significant difference, right? ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ තරමත් විසඳිලා තිබුණත් හැබැයි ඔයාගේකින් ඊට වැඩිය ලොකු වෙනසක් කරන්න පුළුවන් ලොකු value addition එකක් කරන්න පුළුවන් if you have a great deal of a differentiation, still you have an opportunity, right? Still you have an opportunity. And then actually if it puts into any of those, either it should be a solution for some problem that was never fulfilled by anyone else, or it's actually solving a problem in a very better way, in a meaningful and impactful better way, right? Better way. And then actually what will be the way to sustain it, right? Sometimes there are some ideas you can actually solve a problem, but there's very difficult to make a business model out of that, right? Make a business model out of that. So that also critically needed, sometimes not initially. Now Helakuru, we couldn't initially find out a business model, but after 3-4 years we could convert that value we created into a business model. So likewise, at least you should have a long-term way to make it sustainable, right? So if you have such a plan also in your head, maybe it may work, it may not work, but having a plan for that, it actually ideal for a startup to become successful. So those 2-3 questions are the initial questions that I would ask.
Sir, we can see that many young people are waiting for the right time to start. What's the biggest excuse people tell themselves?
Of course, I mean, that's why I mentioned it earlier as well. Now, there's no right time, right? Right time is actually now, right? Then tamai hodava vela, right? If you have an idea, if you have something in your mind, just start doing it, right? Nike wala tagline nagadi, just do it, right? Just do it. So you have to actually start from somewhere. If you start from a very tiny thing today, tomorrow you get another idea to progress it, right? And the day after tomorrow, you get another way, another thinking to make it much more better, right? So that should be the way. You shouldn't have many of the people, excuse. I don't have capital to do this. I don't have, I have the technology knowledge, but I don't have marketing knowledge to do it, right? And some say that, I don't have, I have an idea, but I don't have the expertise to execute this idea. Likewise, there are so much of excuses people make, right? So there's always a way. If you really want to do something, right, there's always a way to do that, right? If you don't have skills to execute your ideas, team up, right? Get someone who believed your idea and teamed up with them, right? You don't always have to pay them for teaming up. Sometimes founders, what they work, they actually share an idea. They actually work on a shared idea, and they actually, allocate the stakes of the company, right? If the idea is worth enough. Okay, you can say when this idea becomes profitable, I will actually share 50% of shares to you, right? So likewise, you can actually team up with a person with that skill set or knowledge, right? So likewise, if you really intended to do something, there's always a way to do that, right? Always a workaround, right? So it's only what matters is, are you really onto doing that, right? ඇත්තටම ඔයාලා කරන්න ඕන නම් යම් කිසි දෙයක්, you will definitely find out a way, right? And don't wait, right? Don't wait for anything. හරි, අර වෙලාව වෙනකම් මේ වෙලාව වෙනකම් ඉස්කෝලේ ඉවර වෙනකම් එක්සෑම් ඉවර වෙනකම් අරකයි මේකයි කියලා, don't wait for any reason, right? Start doing it from somewhere, right? පළවෙනි අඩිය තිබ්බොත් ඔයාට ඊළඟ අඩිය තියන්න ඕන තැන අනිවාර්යෙන් පේන්න පටන් ගන්නවා, right? Okay.
So obviously there have been a lot of ups and downs. And what do you think is the closest you've come to thinking that this might not work? Like Helakuru or Helago, something like that, that it could not work, it's not worth trying.
Yeah, sometimes actually, we feel such situations, most of the time, not actually for the things that in our control, but sometimes if something is out of our control, we get so much of disappointed. Now, one such situation was actually that pay here incident, right? As I mentioned, pay here was always a roller coaster journey. Initially, also we had actually these regulatory challenges to get it central bank approved and provide it in a regulatory compliant manner. And even after that, after resolving that problem and getting the central bank approval and running it smoothly, we got another external shock, right? We got a cyber attack back in 2022, right? Which actually severely affected many of our users, not related to Helakuru. Some of the users have mixed up this incident with Helakuru as well, but it's nothing to do with Helakuru, but it was actually affected our pay here B2B product and their customer base, right? So actually it was kind of a nightmare, right? I mean, I even what very much of mentally down, that I thought I would never be able to bring it back, right, with the damage or reputational damage it did with that cybersecurity incident, and the data breach happened for pay here users, right? But I mean, sometimes actually when you have enough people around you to strongly tighten you up in your downtimes, you can do sometimes even impossible, right? So that's what happened for pay here. Even I was so mentally down, and I was just about kind of giving up. The team around me supported me a lot, and actually the family and friends and even our existing customers, right? I didn't expect that that affected customers will speak on behalf of me, on behalf of our company. But even though they were affected, we got support from them as well. No, this is actually, we can understand the situation, it's not in your control. We did have some mistakes as well, and we worked on them and addressed them, but that incident happened was actually totally out of our control. So that from the support we received, we somehow get it back, right? We actually we had a downtime about 2 days after that cybersecurity incident, but our merchant base, the customers who using pay here, was actually very supportive for us. They waited and they believed our regaining story, regaining journey, regaining their trust and everything, so that we could continue the pay here journey even after such an incident. But it was so much of a nightmare kind of a thing that happened in my entire entrepreneurial journey.
So when looking back, what's been the most painful lesson you've learned while building companies?
I think painful lesson. So Now, we are actually working in a very unique culture here, right? Our working culture is very much of different than the formal working cultures you see mostly in the companies or offices in Sri Lanka, right? We actually operate in a much more freedom-based culture. Everyone is empowered to freely work in their own way, right? We don't actually go and fix them, go and frame them. We have allowed them to work in their own way, but to give the maximum output for the company. But they have the freedom to work in their own way, right? In that way, actually, we have a much of a very close bond between the team, right? Still, actually, they call me Ayap, right? I'm not a boss for them. I'm just a leader who's actually work with them and lead them into as a team to the common goal, right? So in that case, actually, some painful lessons was actually sometimes in when we work in such a bonded or such a you know affect such a bonded kind of working culture. When sometimes when people have to leave because of their personal reasons or because of the external environments reasons, it's very hard, it's very painful to lose the team that I was actually so much closer before that, right? So that happened during this economic crisis period. I mean, Sri Lankan IT companies has this major problem of migration. People started to migrate a lot, right? So there were people who serving with me or working with me from the very beginning, 10 years of service, 9 years of service. Such a long relationship we had with each other as team members. So when they are moving out, when they are migrating, it was so painful for me as the leader and for the entire other team as well. So that is some lesson I learned, very painful thing. For as long as we work together, it is it makes everything great. But when we have to leave due to uncontrollable situations, it's very painful.
So everyone is talking about AI right now. It's very
Yeah.
useful, and I would say most companies are using it. Do you think 5 years from now we'll realize we got completely wrong about it? Do you think it will be as useful or not as much?
I think right now the people who are actually talking about AI is only talking about the tip of the iceberg, right? AI or generative AI is actually still getting started. It's only the beginning, right? There are way more to come. What I always believe is actually this is actually the third era of computing that that has been started. Right, first era was this personal computer era, from mainframe computers to normal computers, uh, which actually changed I mean, how people worked, right? මිනිස්සු කොහොමද ලෝකේ වැඩ කරපු විදිහ සම්පූර්ණයෙන් වෙනස් කරා with the introduction of that first era, right, of computing. And the second era, smartphones and cloud computing. Again, everything changed, right? Everything changed. For anytime, anywhere, from any device, you can access anything, right? Even when you are working, when you are traveling, when you are driving, anything, right? That's the second era also completely changed how people get things done or do their day-to-day work. And this is actually the beginning of the third era, where again how people work, how people get things done is actually completely changing right now, right? And we are not actually in the mid of that era. We are still in the the first door of that era, right? This will actually go way beyond in as I think in my view, right? uh, and it'll ended up actually computing becomes a co-worker, right? Computing becomes a co-founder. For an entrepreneur, it's actually act as a co-founder. Already I'm using it as a co-founder, right? And actually, I mean, it reduces the time that is taken for work to get done, right? And for businesses, for companies, what it actually leaves, it actually makes them more and more productive, right? ඉස්සර වැඩක් කරගන්න මාස 3ක් ගියා නම් දැන් මේ වැඩේ දවස් 3ෙන් සති 3ෙන් කරගන්න පුළුවන් level එකට it will come, right? So all the future workforces, even when you got into the job market, you have to compete not with AI, right? Don't get misunderstood. Not with AI you have to compete. You have to compete with people who are actually fluent in AI, right? Who are actually, you know, ඔයාගේ output එක ඔයා පහක් දෙනකොට some other will actually give their output with AI aided, right? AI assistant la use කරලා AI වලින් polish කරලා AI වලින් වැඩ දාලා they will actually get a output of 50 when you actually giving just 5 with your own skills and, you know, with your own values, right? So if you are to compete with that person who's actually giving 50 when you are only giving 5, you have to embrace AI and embrace everything, and you have to amplify yourself. Always, this is actually my definition of generative AI. AI is always actually an amplifier, right? It's actually an amplifier. So if it is an amplifier, then what happens if 0 gets amplified? Yeah. What happens if 0 gets amplified? Again, it's 0. Right? What happens is 1 gets amplified? Say, suppose from 20, it's 20. But if you have 5, if it gets amplified, it's 100. Right? Likewise, you have to build your own values as well, right? But you have to embrace a generative AI and all these change happening in the world. How people work is actually completely changing. So you have to adapt to that change, and you have to actually make yourself amplified with all this, right? So back in the days, I mean, IT literacy or working with a computer was a value addition for a CV, right? හැබැයි දැන් මොකද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? ඒක නැතුව බෑ දැන්, right? For any kind of a job, it's a must to being literate on computers, right? අන්න ඒ තත්ත්වයට එනවා තව අවුරුදු 5කින් in another 5 years, whether you are actually amplify yourself with AI or you just actually express only yourself, right? Express only your output, right? So that is actually how I think it will drastically change how people work, how companies work, how government works, everyone works. And it's another era that we have to, we were fortunate enough to witness. In my opinion, it's a great deal because, we were a part of that first era, right? Desktop computer before a laptop computer, right? Pentium 3. And we were a part of the second era, smartphones, cloud. And right now, we are a part of the third era as well, right? So it's ever evolving. You have to adapt and amplify yourself. That's what you have to do.
So people often say it's hard to build startups in Sri Lanka. Is the real challenge the ecosystem or the mindset?
I think it's a mindset, in terms of ecosystem. If you have the right mindset, there are so much of people, so much of ecosystem there for you to support, right? And, back in the days, there was a time that, a startup product or a, new business was not much recognized, not much, they seems not credible kind of ecosystem was there back in the days, right? But right now, with all this, hype on entrepreneurship, and everyone is actually, initiating things on behalf of entrepreneurs, right? With this kind of an ecosystem, I think it's not the ecosystem is the problem, but actually your mindset. Excuses, right? Okay, I have an idea, but I don't have this and that and this and that, right? If you have that kind of a mindset, you will never thrive, right? So attitude is everything, right? You have to have that mindset. No, I want to do this differently. I want to make this solved, right? I want to provide a solution for this. I want to make people's life better, right? If you're actually working in that mindset, no one can stop you, right? So it's always actually the mindset, not the ecosystem, as I believe.
So, sir, if you could sit down with your 17-year-old self for 10 minutes, what would you tell him?
That's a nice question. So maybe I would tell him that always focus. What I have realized over all these years is focus is the most essential thing for a founder, for an entrepreneur, right? Sometimes we deviate our focus to this and that, and that actually, is the most bad thing that a founder can do, right? So if I can speak to my 17 years uh, clone, I would say that, focus only one product at a time, right? Because, I mean, after I launched Helakuru back in 15 years back, uh, I tried parallelly several products, right? Several products. And finally, all the other products I did, I tried after Helakuru. Most of the other products actually did not succeeded. Most of them failed. But that very first product, Helakuru, was actually the one helped me to go that journey. So still, something I regret about myself is, at that time I was actually working for focusing on many other things. If I put that all that focus into Helakuru from the day one to the whole journey, I may have done I mean more than this by now, right? So that is something that I would tell.
So, if everyone leaves today remembering just one thing from this conversation, what do you hope it is?
Okay, so final thought for you to take home. Always, entrepreneurship is actually not starting a business, right? Entrepreneurship is always solving meaningful problems, right? Solving impactful problems, right? Just keep in mind that. So if you can actually solve a problem, if you can actually, identify a valid problem around you, around your society, around your community, or around your friends and family, right? If you can actually come up with the creative idea, innovative idea to solve it, right, and make people's life better, that is actually the birthplace of entrepreneurship, right? That is what I have to say.
Mr. Dhanika, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. It's been a genuinely valuable conversation and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for nice moderation. Uh, Really happy to share my journey and thoughts with you. Thank you so much.
And thank you to everyone here for being a part of Spark It Flash sessions. We hope tonight gave you something real to think about. And thank you once again to Mr. Danik for taking time out of his busy schedule to be here with us. Thanks once again and have a great evening, everyone. See you later.
See you. Bye.
See you. Thank you.